Yet, Cadet Bone Spurs is someone who will always quit. And every hour he orders our service members to remain in unnecessary growing danger, he is proving that Donald Trump does not give a damn about leaving a comrade or so many comrades behind. Every moment that Donald Trump leaves our heroes mired in the muck of this illegal war of choice in Iran, he is showing that he cares more about saving his own face than leading our troops. So I come to the floor today with a simple question. Our military men and women go out there every day and do their jobs, no matter the risk, all on Donald Trump's orders. So I ask you, Mr. President, why the hell can't you do your job too?
That was Senator Tammy Duckworth, a woman who left both legs in the wreckage of a helicopter in Iraq, a war she didn't start, a war she didn't choose, a war she almost didn't come home from. She has held the flag that was folded at funerals. She has looked into the eyes of mothers who buried their sons. She knows what the cost of this looks like when it isn't a number on a screen. And the man she is standing across from, the man who had 5 separate opportunities to serve this country, and 5 separate reasons why it was never quite convenient, that man just sent other people's children into another war he will never have to fight, and called it strength.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've come to the floor today as a United States Senator, of course, but also as a former soldier who served in uniform the last time a president rashly sent our men and women into an unjustified war in the Middle East. I spent nearly a year at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, recovering from the injuries I earned in Iraq. And every morning, as I struggled to sit up straight, every time I was rolled into yet another surgery, I made sure to read the poster I had next to my hospital bed. It was a framed copy of the Soldier's Creed, the words that those lucky enough to wear the Army uniform live by. That same framed copy now hangs by my desk here in DC. And as I glanced at it this morning, I realized that there's perhaps no greater proof that Donald Trump never deigned to serve a day in his life than the mockery he makes of the Soldier's Creed's commitments every single day he has been in office. The creed may be associated with the Army, but the sentiments hold true for all of those who wear the uniform of this great nation. Its 13 lines tells us to be disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained, proficient, and to look out for those who look out for us, to look out for one another. Donald Trump is supposed to be our service members' commander-in-chief. The very least we should expect of him is to epitomize the standards that we ask our troops to swear by, to live by. The very least we should expect of the commander-in-chief is to be as competent, disciplined, and professional as the men and women whose very lives hinge on his capacity to lead, on that competence and professionalism we expect to see in the White House. The Creed makes clear that our troops will never quit, that they will never leave a fallen comrade behind, yet Cadet Bone Spurs is someone who will always quit. And every hour he orders our service members to remain in unnecessary growing danger, he is proving that Donald Trump does not give a damn about leaving a comrade or so many comrades behind. Every moment that Donald Trump leaves our heroes mired in the muck of this illegal war of choice in Iran, he is showing that he cares more about saving his own face than leading our troops. So I come to the floor today with a simple question. Our military men and women go out there every day and do their jobs, no matter the risk, all on Donald Trump's orders. So I ask you, Mr. President, why the hell can't you do your job too? Why can't you live up to the same level of proficiency as our troops? Look, I'm proud of every mission I completed in Iraq, but I would never, ever wish another endless, needless, unjustified war like the one I served in on anybody else. I wouldn't wish it on the heroes who are packing up their rucks right now, knowing they may never touch American soil again. I wouldn't wish it on their families who are being forced to spend their days anxiously awaiting news from half a world away. And I wouldn't wish it on the American people who want their president to focus on bringing the costs down here at home, not starting new, expensive, taxpayer-funded wars continents away. But Trump either doesn't understand or he simply doesn't care about that. From the moment this conflict began, the president has tried to shroud his incompetence behind the valor of our service members. When asked to justify his illegal actions, Donald Trump's tried to hide his cowardice behind our hero's courage. He's tried to act as if questioning why we're at war is the same as questioning the skill and bravery of our troops themselves. It isn't.
Tammy
and I'm here to call
Duckworth did
bullshit
not
on
give
the
a speech
President of the
today.
United States.
She delivered a reckoning. A woman who left both her legs in the wreckage of a helicopter over Iraq, who has sat with grieving mothers, who has folded the flag, who carries the war in her own body every single day, stood up and said what the families of deployed soldiers are not allowed to say out loud, that American troops are being asked to bleed for a war nobody has explained, that the people waiting at home, wives and husbands and children, counting days on a calendar, deserve more than a president who treats their sacrifice as political cover, that the taxpayers writing the check for another open-ended conflict in the Middle East have a right to ask what exactly they are paying for. Duckworth's point was not complicated, it was surgical. Questioning this war is not betraying the troops. It is the only way left to protect them, by demanding that the man who sent them there finally stand in front of the country and answer for it. And the reason that demand lands so hard is not because of what Duckworth said. It is because of who she is when she says it. You cannot dismiss a woman who paid that price as soft on defense. You cannot call her naive about the cost of war. She is the cost of war. She is standing right there. And Trump has no answer for that. Call it strength.
Because I know that our military will always do the best job possible. When given a mission, our service members will say, yes, I will serve. They don't say, why me? They don't ask, will I be safe? No. They dust off their boots, they show up, and they do what's asked of them to the best of their ability every single time after time, tour after tour, no matter the risk, no matter the sacrifice. They will always, always execute their orders to the maximum capability of their professionalism, and they are proud to do it. That isn't the problem. The problem here is that the person who's supposed to be leading them spends more time talking about his Marie Antoinette ballroom than he does sitting in the Situation Room trying to get us out of this war. The problem is the guy who claims to be making America great again looks at the word America and only sees the letters M and E in the middle of it. The problem is that the commander-in-chief not only has no idea what the end state is like for his war of choice, but properly doesn't even know what the term end state means at all.
Tammy Duckworth just made a contrast that the White House cannot walk back. American service members show up, follow orders, accept the risk, and carry out every mission with a discipline this country takes for granted. That has never been the question. What Duckworth forced into the open today is everything that sits above them. The judgment of the man deciding where that courage gets spent. Because while soldiers are preparing for what sacrifice actually costs, the president who sent them there still cannot tell the American people what the end goal is. That is not a messaging problem. That is a commander-in-chief failure. The troops are not the issue. The man giving the orders is.
The problem is that even in the last 2 weeks, the man who is in charge of our nation's nuclear codes has himself gone increasingly nuclear. He's not believing literal war with Iran is enough. He's now gone on to proverbial war with the Vatican, choosing to pick fights with the Pope of all people. The Pope! Rather than try to engage in any semblance of real diplomacy to end the conflict in the Middle East. He's threatened to annihilate an entire civilization, terrifying people overseas and here at home who are understandably worried about retaliatory strikes. And now, after one half-assed day of so-called negotiations with Iran, he's whipsawed to the next risky frontier in the region, a dangerous, complex, partial military blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, launching it at our nation's expense with no justification, no explanation, or any real plan of what comes next. His only plan seems to rely on the valor, the willingness to sacrifice, the professionalism of our military men and women. But let me tell you, that is not enough. They need a true commander.
Tammy Duckworth is now saying out loud what military families have been thinking since the first order was given, that this escalation came without diplomacy, without restraint, and without a single credible answer for what happens the day after, that the threats, the sudden policy reversals, the Strait of Hormuz operation, all of it is putting American troops in greater danger, while the White House uses their professionalism as a shield for its own absence of strategy. That is the indictment underneath the indictment. Soldiers are expected to execute perfectly. The man giving the orders still cannot explain the mission, the exit, or the cost.
But Trump is Trump, and he is actively, unabashedly telling us how to ignore what we are all seeing with our own eyes. He's trying to declare mission accomplished, despite his obvious failures at every single turn. He's declaring, and I quote, "We did it, we're winning," after all signs point to the opposite. We're still at war. Americans are still at risk. Civilians across the region are still dying for no reason that anyone can truly articulate. In reality, the only thing that Donald Trump has accomplished over the last 6 weeks is more chaos. Because of his choices, a new younger Ayatollah is in charge, who seems even more radical than his father was. 13 American heroes have been killed, with hundreds more wounded. More Gold Star parents are grieving their children. And more American families are struggling to afford the spiking gas prices.
Tammy Duckworth is now holding the administration's victory claims up against the actual ledger, and the numbers do not match. American service members have been killed. Hundreds more have come home wounded. Families are grieving in private while the White House declares success in public. Gas prices are not falling. The war is not shrinking. It is expanding. And Donald Trump is still standing at a podium calling it a win. That is what Duckworth is cutting through, the gap between the performance and the reality. The politicians are not paying the price for this war. The troops are, their families are, and so are you.
They're unsure if they can pay even more every time they go to the gas station. But they have to, because they need to get to work. They've got to take their kids to school. They've got to take their aging parents to the doctor. The farmers of Illinois, the farmers of this great nation, have seen at the time that we should be planting, their input costs skyrocket because of Donald Trump's war of choice. Look, war is always tragic, but when it's preventable, when it's unjustified, it's not just tragic, it's a travesty. Trump wouldn't let himself be dragged in by the bone spurs to serve in Vietnam. So how dare he drag our nation into a war of his choice today? But this draft dodger, this 5-time draft dodger, is too infatuated with maximum pressure to make a serious effort at even minimum diplomacy. Once again, the Trump foreign policy doctrine has proven reckless, senseless, and dangerous.
Tammy Duckworth has now drawn the line all the way back to the man who made the first call. Families are paying more at the pump. Troops are moving toward danger. Diplomacy was not exhausted, it was skipped. And then she lands the sharpest contrast of all. Donald Trump had his chance to serve. 5 times the door was open. 5 times he found a reason it wasn't for him. Yet today he sits in the chair that commands the military and sends other people's children into another war of choice. That is her indictment in one sentence. Maximum pressure with no exit plan is not leadership. It is recklessness, and everyone is paying for it except the man who ordered it.
A doctrine in which fact and fiction are one and the same, one in which our commander-in-chief seems to come to military decisions by virtue of temper tantrums and announces them via tweet in the middle of the night, and one in which avarice outweighs advice every single time. Look, unlike Trump, I actually know what it's like to leave your blood soaking into the desert sand a half a world away. So I know what it's like. I know what it's like and what is at stake for the troops this administration is sending into harm's way. We must safeguard their valor and their professionalism by doing our jobs. I can tell you this, it's a whole lot easier to cover your eyes and order other Americans to sacrifice their children and sacrifice themselves if you don't have to do any of the sacrificing yourself. It's easier to send other people's children to fight in a war if you know your own children are cozy in a penthouse suite somewhere. It's easier to ignore the everyday realities of war from inside the hallowed halls of the White House, where you've got McDonald's being DoorDash to the Oval Office. But it's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible if you've been actually outside the wire yourself.
Tammy Duckworth just stopped this from being a political argument and made it something the audience cannot look away from. She is not speaking from a briefing room. She is speaking from experience, outside the wire, under fire, and then years later, carrying the weight of what that costs in her own body every single day. That is why what she said about Trump cuts so deep. It is not complicated. It is not partisan. It is the simplest truth in the room. Ordering sacrifice is easy when the sacrifice will never touch you, your children, or anyone sitting at your table. Duckworth knows the difference, and she is demanding that the man making these decisions finally learn it too.
So I've come to the floor today to keep true a promise I first made over 2 decades ago. I ran for Congress, not because I wanted to be in Congress, not because I wanted to be a congressman or a senator. I ran for Congress to honor the men and women who carried me out of that bloody war zone. I made a promise that when the drums of war started beating again, I would be in a position to make sure that our elected officials fully consider the true cause of war, not just in terms of money, but in human lives and in the sacrifices of the men and women who wear the colors of this great nation. That was the vow I made to the troops I deployed with and to all of those who've served since I've hung up my uniform. I'm here today under this great Capitol dome to keep that most sacred oath, because right now, thousands of our troops are ready to do their jobs, even if it means laying down their lives. And it's tragic, it's disgusting to me that even as they prepare to do their jobs, our president and some members of this chamber seem so eager to neglect their own.
Tammy Duckworth is now turning the camera on the institution that has been looking away. Congress, the body with the constitutional authority to authorize war, demand accountability, and protect the people being sent into danger, and the body that has, once again, chosen silence over responsibility. Her warning is not gentle. Patriotism is not writing a blank check for every conflict this White House decides to start. It is asking the hard questions before the flag comes home folded. It is weighing the human cost before the order is given. If Congress keeps refusing to do that job, the troops and their families will pay. Again.
So as those drums of war echo louder than they have ever in years, I am here to remind Donald Trump that he does not have the authority to unilaterally force us into war. He may never have read the Constitution, but I have. So let me direct his attention to Article 1, which makes clear that only Congress has the power to declare war. We are the ones tasked with deciding when and how Americans are sent into combat. We are the ones charged with that most solemn duty. Yet Trump is acting as if Article 1 simply doesn't exist, as if obeying the Constitution is optional, as if our founding document is just a yellowing, crumbling piece of paper that he can crumble up and toss into the garbage can at will. This must not be a partisan issue. No matter if you're struggling to pay rent, or if your name is plastered in fake gold on a building on Fifth Avenue, no one can ignore the Constitution, especially if you've sworn an oath to defend it. No matter if you're a Mar-a-Lago worker pulling down double shifts of the President of the United States, no one is above the law.
Tammy Duckworth is now making this about something larger than Trump, larger than Iran, larger than this moment. She is making it about the document that is supposed to govern all of it. The Constitution does not give one man the authority to send Americans into combat while everyone else watches. Article I exists for exactly this reason, so that no president, no matter how certain of himself, can start a war alone. Duckworth's warning is not complicated. When Congress hands that power over without a fight, it is not protecting the country. It is abandoning it, and the troops absorb the cost of that failure every single time.
Look, I believe fully that there are certain solemn, urgent times when our military must be called upon to defend us. There are certain moments when the threat in question is significant and imminent, instances when military force is the most effective tool at hand, and that using it is necessary to protect America and her interests. The thing is, from what little information the Trump administration has shared publicly that he hasn't immediately contradicted, and sometimes the same sentence, this was not one of those times. But if the administration thinks that I'm wrong and there was imminent, reasonable, actual threat to America, then guess what? The floor is theirs. Come to the Senate. We're just 20 minutes from the White House. It's not hard to find. It's even faster in your motorcade, Mr. President. It's not hard to find us. We're the building with the big dome on top. We're only a 20-minute walk. Trump knows where the Capitol building is. It's a spot he told the insurrectionists to march towards on January 6th. So if his team actually believes that war is unjustified, then they need to come to Congress and do their jobs. Explain their case, giving the American people a say through their elected representatives, the members who sit at every one of these desks in this chamber. They need to respect the American people enough to finally tell them why they're being forced to bear the cost of this conflict, both in dollars and cents and daughters and sons. They need to respect our service members enough to prove why war with Iran is worth more children growing up without their mom or dad. They need to make it clear that they've thought this through and well enough that they can actually articulate what an end state with this war of choice in Iran would even look like. Then, when their case has been made, when the debate here in Congress is completed, then the members of this chamber must vote. It's our duty. Yes, it is our burden. It's the least we can do for those who are willing to sacrifice everything to safeguard this democracy. But if the Trump administration refuses to do that, if they refuse to adhere to the Constitution, well, then it begs the question, what are you hiding? What are you hiding, Mr. President? We already know you're incompetent. What else are you hiding? Look, we've now been at this war of choice, of Trump's choice, for a month and a half. Thousands are dead, grieving, wounded, suffering. Only someone as inept and unfit, someone as callous and cruel as Trump would see this as winning. Only a draft-dodging coward would think that this is the right way to engage in a war. Only a man so unqualified to be commander-in-chief would be proud to keep on risking our heroes' lives without even a concept of a plan for how to get them back home without risking more graves at Arlington. We can't let this chaos continue unchecked. As our troops continue to sacrifice whatever is asked of them, we senators need to do the absolute minimum required of us. That's why this week I'm calling up my War Powers resolution demanding that the Trump administration finally end this illegal war and to call for some actual public oversight and accountability on behalf of the American people. It will come to the floor for a vote shortly. So to my Republican colleagues, you have a choice, a simple one really. You can vote with me to end this conflict and show that you actually care about putting America first, like you claim, or you can vote to put Trump's ego first, proving that when push comes to shove, you care more about protecting Trump's thin skin than the Constitution that you swore to defend. At this point, it's pretty clear. Donald J. Trump will always be more interested in looking out for his own self-interest rather than truly serving American interests. So my question is, if any of my Republican colleagues are actually brave enough to stand up and tell Donald J. Trump, the 5-time draft-dodging coward, enough. Thank you. You have the floor.
Tammy Duckworth has now closed the case. The administration went around Congress. It never produced a credible endgame. It kept sending American lives into an expanding conflict and called the result a win. And then Duckworth did something every senator in that chamber felt. She forced the choice into the open where it could not be ignored. You either stand with the Constitution and demand this war be brought to account, or you stand with the president's ego while the troops and their families carry what that decision costs. There is no third option. There is no abstaining from this vote. Real leadership is not ordering sacrifice and calling it strength. It is having the courage to stop a reckless war before one more family gets the call.